The old saying says we all have two things in common, death and taxes. So I'm not talking about the first one today, but there is something happening with taxes. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act introduced transformative changes to the U.S. tax code, many of which are set to expire at the end of 2025. It certainly will impact us on many levels, but for those with a philanthropic strategy, what are the changes there? We're going to get into the details right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everybody, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Thanks again for joining me. My guest in the studio today is Jeff Gerald, Vice President and Head of Advisor Engagement at National Philanthropic Trust. Jeff, good to have you in the studio.
It's great to be here, Anthony.
We have a lot to get to because one of the things that we all know right now, it's the end of the year. It's what we call giving season. A lot of people are thinking about their philanthropic values and who they're going to donate to, the nonprofits. But something that, as I teased in the intro, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that went into effect in 2017, 2018, kind of changed the way that people look at their tax strategies. So I guess the first way to kind of look at it is, how will it, let's talk about what it looks like today versus what it's going to look like on January 1, 2026, if the sunset happens and Congress doesn't enact any kind of legislation to continue the act.
Well, let's start there, because I think if we fast forward to the future's uncertain, right? We still haven't invented the way to predict the future, right? So we know that we don't know, right? We don't know.
No crystal balls at the table, right?
100%.
That's right.
100%. So then we have to start with what we know, and we know the current legislation provided for three key things. It changed the income tax brackets from 39.6 down to 37. It changed the ability to reduce or remove significant aspects of your estate tax, and it also increased the cash deduction limits from 50% to 60% of AGI. So that's kind of what we're dealing with today. You read different things. It seems like when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into effect, it did perhaps put a little bit of a dent in the way people think about using their philanthropic strategies to reduce their taxable income. Is that the case? Did you see that starting in 2017 through now? I don't think we saw it in 2017. Part of that was the significant market run-up, but I do think you're absolutely right. Over time, we do see an impact to overall charitable giving at the top line. As it relates to donor-advised funds, we've actually seen an increase because people are starting to leverage strategies that benefit from accelerating future gifts into a year in which they're having a taxable event.
Right.
So donor-advised funds have continued to rise in popularity because of, I believe, some of the changes the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act made.
So Jeff, I know you talk to clients and financial advisors all the time. What are you recommending as some gifting strategies that they should be aware of?
That's a great question. Let's start with what clients are doing today. Most clients, without really thinking about it, employ one strategy that's not as effective or efficient as it could be.
Yeah.
When they get asked for donation from a charity that they like, they might just simply write a check, maybe to their place of worship. But that's not really as efficient as it could be, Anthony. So if we think about the most common strategy that should be deployed more, really, let's give an example.
Yeah.
That's all right. So you've got someone selling their business, and they want to contribute, or stock, they want to contribute $2.5 million in stock. They're going to sell it. They're going to pay capital gains tax on it. The tax on that would be, on the sale, would be $595,000 of capital gains tax. Now, they would get a deduction against their adjusted gross income for $1.9 million. That means they're going to avoid, or their taxes would be reduced by $704,850.
So not too bad.
No, it's pretty compelling,
not too bad.
right?
But you have another example here for us.
It's absolutely right. So same concept, same idea, $2.5 million in stock, but this time I'm going to transfer it in kind to the public charity. That means that the charity is going to sell it, and as a non-taxable entity, they're not going to pay any capital gains tax on it. So what does that mean? We've got a final gift of $2.5 million. I pay zero taxes on the entirety of the gift. That means I have now avoided $1.5 million in taxation, right? All of that is capital I get to leverage for the causes I care about.
That's incredible. So it's not, you're giving less to the government and more to the charity that matters the most to you. That's a great strategy. I know this is one of many strategies that you can recommend as you talk to someone. Obviously, everybody has their own individual needs and goals, et cetera.
Absolutely, and they should always talk to their financial advisor, because that's why
that relationship exists, right? That's the power of advice. But one thing I would say in addition to this, Anthony, is that this can apply to any asset that has long-term capital gains tax associated with it. I would even say, don't forget, cryptocurrency is also a long-term capital gain property. Your private business is long-term capital gain property. So if you're contemplating the sale of a business, the sale of Apple stock that you bought 30 years ago, hopefully all of us did that, right? Right? Just kidding. It was just a joke. But that's the power of thinking about and in being in conversation with your advisor.
Is that your recommendation if they, because most of the strategists that we've talked to, and especially our chief investment officer here, does expect that whoever's sitting in the White House, once this is said and done, will figure out a way to go to Congress and get them to pass legislation that extends the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in some form.
Right.
Even if that does happen, is this a similar strategy to what you're recommending, or does it just depend on whether it expires or not?
I think the strategy will always be an existent and a good strategy. I think to your point, what we're continuing to hear is everything is on the table, right? That old saw, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu, right? That idea. So what we want to do is we want to contemplate, what can I do today? What do I think about tomorrow? And then ultimately, how does that lever into my overall financial picture and goals that can drive me to my philanthropic destination? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Absolutely, it makes sense. And I think something that many of our viewers are familiar with. We talked a lot about the estate planning side of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where if it does sunset, now it's like $14 million for an individual. If it sunsets, it goes back to 5 or 7, depending on adjusting for inflation. So that's a significant difference in what you're going to pay versus what then what you're going to pay today. So talk about donor advised funds. We know that they're a great kind of a vehicle for philanthropic giving, and also it does have some tax benefits in there. Talk about why you think that that's something that people should be talking about with their advisors.
Great question. If I may, let me just take 30 seconds and just provide some common terminology for what donor advised funds is and how they work. So donor advised funds are really just programs administered by a public charity. So when I contribute cash or long-term property to a donor advised fund, I get an immediate tax deduction, and if it's property, I avoid 100% of the capital gains tax. Those assets can be invested and may grow. They have the possibility to both lose money and gain money, right? Managed by UBS, and then granted to the charity their choice at the time of their choosing. And this is what's really important. The timing of your deduction is when you make the contribution to the donor advised fund. But you can establish a pool of funds that you can give away over time. In particular, for those clients contemplating retirement, this can be a ready-made pool of reserves that they can give even when their income's lower, right? But they capture the deduction at their highest income, but that money is still being available to be given away. And that's the power of the donor advised fund. That's why this is something they should think about. Foundationally as well, because when we really think about philanthropy, Anthony, this is really a values conversation.
Yeah.
Right? This is why I believe what I believe.
Absolutely. And the greatest thing is you set yourself apart from your friends, neighbors, even family members by understanding what your values are and giving to the charities that matter most to you and to the family and whatever matters to you in your life. And what I love about what you said is that you can time it, you can kind of release the funds over time. It's not like writing a check to your favorite charity today and it just goes and then it's gone. You can actually plan it better for them and for yourself.
That's absolutely right. And that's what we're seeing. And you can say, well, you want to give to your place of worship, you want to give to the animal shelter, or say save the oceans. But also what we're seeing in a very powerful way is people giving to natural disasters throughout the world, or localized disasters, humanitarian needs. All of those things are things that you can use that ready reserve of funds, philanthropic capital that is standing at the ready to be deployed.
So what's important for people to keep in mind when they have their philanthropic goals in mind? They're thinking about whether it's this year, next year, or in 2026, regardless of what happens with the TCJA. What should they be considering as they're making their plans?
I think the critical thing to think about is timing, right? Does this make sense for me? And I would say it goes beyond just where your income is. It also goes to what asset can I think about that can fuel my philanthropy, right? So if someone is, say, time of year, everybody's always thinking, I'll put my CFP hat on for a moment if that's all right. Just thinking about reevaluating, where am I in my portfolio? Where are my winners? Where are my losers, right? How do I reallocate back to an allocation that maybe is more in line with my own risk tolerance? Well, very few people think about contributing those winners to a donor advised fund as a path to rebalancing. So why would I encourage someone to do that?
Right.
Because now they've taken a taxable event into a tax deduction. And conceivably, let's even play this forward in this legacy concept, right? If you're thinking about your kids, you could even put some of those winners into a donor advised fund, maybe managed by your children, so they get to give it away to the charitable causes they care about as a conduit to have a conversation around, hey, here's why I give to these charities. You don't have to give to mine, but let's talk about how you select them. Let's talk about how you think about them. Why would you give money to this organization? Let's have that conversation. So that's what I would leave you with.
That's great.
Have the conversation.
Yeah, and going back to what you started with is about not having that crystal ball or the way to look in the future. It's like looking at the certainty of today versus the unexpectedness and uncertainty of tomorrow. So make the plans now.
That's absolutely right. And if I can just build on that,
yeah.
You know, you and I, we just talked about that. We started in the same time.
Yes.
We've seen significant legislation impact the tax code, the tax environment often. And where I have seen people try to prognosticate, especially as it relates to irrevocable choices, that becomes really challenging. So my guidance, I don't know about yours, is to say, let's not try to prognosticate. Let's do what we can know today. Take advantage of where we are now. That's the best advice I could give to anyone thinking about planning.
It is great advice. And as you also said, and we say this all the time, make sure you're having a conversation with your financial advisor.
Yes.
Because everyone's individual situations are different when it comes to your investing profile, your kind of time horizons, and what you can give, you know, depending on what you have available to give to the charities that matter to you. So Jeff, I can't thank you enough for coming in today. As we know, this is that time of year when people are thinking about their philanthropic giving. So some great ideas and some strategies, as you talked about earlier, for them to think about as they go on after watching our conversation today. So thanks for being here, Jeff.
Glad to be here, Anthony.
Great. Jeff Gerald again from National Philanthropic Trust. And there's more information from UBS and our great partners like NPT on our Insights website at ubs.com/views. Plus, you can follow UBS on social media. We're on all the major channels, including Instagram. Give us a follow at UBS Trending. Lots of studios content there for you. And as always, as we've said a few times, make sure you are chatting with your financial advisor. Very important to do that. Till next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. We wish you a great rest of your day. And remember to keep your eyes on what's trending, everybody. We'll see you soon.